welcome to another BookTube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you are all having a lovely Sunday. Today is Saturday when I'm filming this. It's hot outside. We've been down the beach and I've been on a paddleboard, my brother-in-law's paddleboard, and I was very brave and I did very well, so I'm very, very pleased with myself. But that's not what this video is about. This is not how brave Lauren was on the paddleboard video. This is my June wrap-up. Now, June was the month during which I read books associated with, based on, inspired by, etc, etc, Jane Eyre. And I really had a good month. Now, I didn't read as much as I normally would. I read 7 books, which I don't feel guilt about. Not that I ever really feel guilt with reading, but I don't feel like, oh, I could have fit a few more in, because the truth is I probably could have fit a few more in if I'd have read other things, but I was just so much enjoying being immersed in the Jane Eyre story. And also within the books that I've read, I've actually read a short story collection of short stories based on Jane Eyre. So I've read a lot of interpretations of girls who are mistreated by their family and then go to a school where they're also mistreated by the school and then become a governess or a teacher and then meet someone who they fancy but is a bit odd and then go away for a bit and then come back. So I've read a lot of interpretations of that, because that is the general gist of the plot of Jane Eyre. But I've really loved doing this. I've really enjoyed being immersed in it, and I feel like it's something I'm gonna potentially do maybe once a year. Like, I was thinking about Pride and Prejudice retellings. Obviously I can read Bridget Jones, and maybe doing that next year at some point. But yeah, really enjoyed doing Jane Eyre. Would definitely recommend it, and I'm going to talk through some of the books that I read, well, all of the books that I read in the month of June that were based on Jane Eyre. The first book I read that was based on Jane Eyre was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I really liked this, and I actually gave it 5 stars and put it in my favourite books of the year so far, because I was just so taken by how much I enjoyed the storyline and how much I enjoyed the character of Jane, and honestly, like, how easy this was to follow as a classic. I feel like I grade classics on a different sort of level to ordinary books. Very rarely do I pick up a book and not really know what's going on with the plot, but when it comes to classics, that is quite often a feeling I have. But I didn't get that at all with Jane Eyre. I really followed it very well. It's just so well written. It's massive. That's another reason that I only got 7 books read this month, because I didn't finish this until the 15th of June, and I didn't want to start anything else until I had read this, because I wanted this to be my starting point, and then read everything based on that, so that when I was thinking about how it was related to Jane Eyre, I didn't want to start thinking about how this was related to Rebecca, for instance. But yeah, really loved it, gave it 5 stars, and really enjoyed it, and will definitely revisit it, so very much enjoyed it. The only thing I didn't do this month, I said I was going to watch some Jane Eyre adaptations, and I didn't end up doing anything like that. Cheeky of me. The next book I finished is an audiobook, and I will not go into detail about it here because it's one of my favourite books ever and I'm always going on about it, but the audiobook is particularly good, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Daphne du Maurier herself never explicitly said that Rebecca was based on Jane Eyre, but there's a lot of like similar themes, like plain girl meets eccentric man with big house, there's fire there, and yeah, it's just, I really love this story, and the audiobook is fantastic, and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a new way to enjoy Rebecca, Simon, if you're looking for a new way to enjoy Rebecca, then definitely give the audiobook a go, because I feel like she does a really good job, and I've listened to that twice now, and read the book once, and every time loved it. So that was the next book I read. Then the next one I read was Wide Sargasso Sea by Jane Eyre. This is an adaptation of Jane Eyre, told from the perspective, well, told from many perspectives, including that of Mr. Rochester, but also told from the perspective of Bertha, Mr. Rochester's wife in the attic. In this book you follow her beginnings, and she is not born Bertha, she's born Antoinette. He renames her because he didn't really like the name Antoinette, so he thought he called her Bertha instead. So you follow her childhood, and then her meeting Rochester, and then the last part is her living with Mr. Rochester in England. And yeah, I mean, I read this, I studied this for my it was either A level or AS level English, and loved it, and remember feeling like at the time, oh, this is a bit sexy, and it is quite sexy the whole way through. But yeah, really enjoyed it. Didn't love it as much as I thought I was going to on a reread, because I sort of looked at it quite fondly. I remember this being like one of the first books that I'd studied that I really enjoyed, and I remember thinking, oh, when I actually come around to rereading this, and this has been on my reread plans for so long. I bought, I had a Penguin Modern Classic edition of it that I bought when I first started BookTube, and I always said I was going to reread it, and then I bought this like maybe even 2 years ago. I remember when I bought this with Jean in Gower Street Waterstones one day, and yeah, really had a plan to read it, and then thought, oh well, I'll do it when I'm doing Jane Eyre. So it had been a long time in the process, but yes, very much enjoy it. Very atmospheric, very sort of sexy, hot, sweaty, sensual. There's a lot to unpack here in terms of race and slavery and plantation work and things like that. But yeah, I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was going to be higher rated for me, but I gave it 3 stars. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. 3 stars still means I enjoyed it, so I did still enjoy it. And then the next book I read was Jane, which is by Patricia Park. This is actually pronounced E-Jane. Jane E, the character in this, is a Korean girl, and it's set in New York and also in Seoul, I think, in Korea. And yeah, I flitted between this because during reading this, and again, this is another one that took me quite a long time to read. During reading this, I didn't not enjoy it, but I did find some parts of it really unbelievable in a sort of like in a way that removed me from the story. Not in a way like that where there's like magic in Harry Potter, that's unbelievable, but like, so basically Jane becomes a childminder for Ed and Beth Farley, Maisie Farley, their names are, looking after their daughter, who is a Chinese baby that they've adopted, and Jane and Ed falling in love. It just sort of happens. There's no like, basically he makes her a few sandwiches at night, and then they're in love, and then all you ever hear about is how much he loves her. Like, there's never actually, like, you never see them enjoying themselves or having a laugh together or anything like that. All you ever hear is about how much he loves her, and she knows how much he loves her, and like that bit really, because Ed was a knobbish character, as is Mr. Rochester, but like that really, there wasn't enough built on that for me, so that really took me away from the story. What I did really love in this book was the food mentioned. So I mentioned those sandwiches, but also when Jane goes to Korea for a while, you hear about all the food that they eat there, and I really liked the sort of application of her experiences in Korea compared with her life in New York and her friends, and she had a boyfriend there and things like that. And yeah, I enjoyed it, but I feel like when I had to really think about whether this was a 2 or a 3 star for me, and I think in the end I was too sort of like pulled out of the story by a few aspects of it that ended up me giving it 2 stars. So yeah, I still think it's a really good, like, if this wasn't based on Jane Eyre, would I have enjoyed it more? Maybe I would have done, but because I was sort of like knowing what was gonna happen, like the stepping stones, I was thinking, oh, how's that gonna get there? And I feel like some of the things were just sort of like, it was a leap too far for me, potentially. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I did not enjoy it. 2 stars is, it's okay, which it was okay for me. Then the next one I read was a short story collection called Rita I Married Him. These are stories inspired by Jane Eyre. This is edited by Tracy Chevalier, but it includes stories from people such as Tessa Hadley, Sarah Hall, Emma Donoghue, Susan Hill, Patricia Park, who wrote E-Jane, Nadifa Mohammed, Tracy Chevalier, Linda Grant, Audrey Niffenegger. And again, this was a 2 star for me, because for every sort of good story in here, which I've really felt linked back to Jane Eyre, there was 5 that literally had nothing to do with Jane Eyre, might have been a wedding, or might have had started with the words Rita I Married Him. And I just feel like you can't just, and maybe I would have judged this in a different way, because I didn't hate any of the stories in here, but if this was just a short story collection all written by women, which they are, and they said, oh, here's a short story collection all written by women about marriage and relationships and friendships, I would have been like, oh yeah, no, actually that's quite good. But because it was like linked to Jane Eyre, some of them are literally like I said, some of them start with the line Rita I Married Him, and then that's the only thing that it's got to do with Jane Eyre at all. So yeah, it was, a lot of them were very like, I went straight in and there was this like boho wedding going on, which was the first story I read, and I enjoyed it, but there's literally like nothing that you could link that to. Someone jumps out of a window at the end, and I was like, is that tiny little thing there that Bertha jumps from the burning building, is that what that is? And yeah, so didn't not enjoy it, but as a collection based on Jane Eyre, I think someone going to this thinking, oh, I love Jane Eyre, can't wait to read short stories based on it, I think you'd be disappointed going to this thinking it's going to be completely Jane Eyre. But yeah, like, I enjoyed some of them very, very much. So that's that, 2 stars. Then I finished the audiobook, which was a 5-star book of Jane Steele, which is a retelling of Jane Eyre, in that she is... I went to it thinking she was an assassin, but it's not. It's just that she's murdered 5 men in her life. Now, what I really, really liked about this book is that the character Jane Steele is reading Jane Eyre, and she's sort of like linking it to her life. So it's almost like the hard work is done for you because she's doing that. It's historical fiction, and yeah, she's just really sassy and cool, Jane Steele, and like she really she kills some men who are treating her and other people absolutely disgustingly, and it's a real sort of girl power celebration of women empowerment, and the violence in there is completely justified towards those men that treat Jane and the women around her so badly. It's also got, I could have done with a little, like, I gave it 5 stars and I really, really loved it, and I really would recommend it. The audiobook in particular was fantastic, but the one thing I would say is that there was a little tiny smidgen of lesbian representation in there, and I was like, brilliant, I hope this is going to go somewhere, this is going to be a big part of it, this is a really good idea to do that. And it didn't really get off the ground, and it was sort of like something was happening and I was thinking, oh, is this going to lead on to something? And then later on it sort of like just touched upon. So that was the only thing that, like, could have given it, like, I still gave it 5 stars and I still really, really loved it, but it could have gotten like 5+ stars if that had happened. But yeah, really, really enjoyed it. I think the storyline was great, and just like the sort of references to Jane Eyre, and each sort of chapter started with a line from Jane Eyre, and yeah, she references a lot of the people and a lot of the characters compared to people she knows and things like that. So yeah, I really, really love Jane Steele, and I think this is one that sort of the flip side of what I've done this year is the books that I gave 5 stars last year, I'm revisiting them as audiobooks this year. I think next year I will probably revisit Jane Steele as an actual book because I feel like there's a lot to get from it then as well. So very, very much enjoyed it, gave it 5 stars. And then the last book I read, which is very cute, I sort of picked this up thinking, oh, if I don't get this finished in time, I can at least mention it in my wrap up and say I'm going to finish it soon, but actually it really didn't take me very long to read, and that's Jane Airhead by Kay Woodward. This is a library book, so it's shiny. Now this is a teenage book, a young adult book about a girl called Charlotte who is desperate to find her mother a new partner, and Charlotte is absolutely enamoured by the story of Jane Eyre. She calls it the book, she rereads it on the regular, she's always got it going, she talks incessantly to her best friend and her mother about how much she loves Jane Eyre, and she sort of links people in normal life to characters in Jane Eyre. So like a woman turns up at the school and she's like, oh, here's Blanche Ingram, and nobody else really knows who she's talking about. And what I will say, although I found this really fun and enjoyable and light, I think if I was a teenager coming to this, having not read Jane Eyre, I'd find myself a bit lost at sea with it, I think, because I just feel like it was, yeah, there was a lot of references to Jane Eyre, but obviously I've been really immersing myself in Jane Eyre. I think otherwise, I'm not sure how much this would like sit well with a teenager nowadays. Also, it was written in 2009, so it is a little bit dated. But yeah, I just found it quite fun. I ended up giving it 3 stars. It didn't take me long at all, and yeah, I just quite enjoyed it. I just found it quite fun. So those are the 7 books that I read in the month of June. Almost keep saying Jane. It's been very hard. I'm very pleased with the coined phrase of June Eyre, but I have been calling Jane like then all bloody month. So yes, those are the books that I read in the month of June. Let me know if you read any Jane Eyre books or adaptations or inspired by. We have got tomorrow, so this has gone up on Sunday, so tonight on Sunday night I'm going to be discussing Wide Sargasso Sea with my Patreon book club members, because that was the book that we picked. I gave the choice of Rita I Married Him and Wide Sargasso Sea, and the votes went for Wide Sargasso Sea. So looking forward to discussing with those guys what they found, how they found Wide Sargasso Sea. But that's it from me. Hope you're all well. Tomorrow is the 1st of July. Bloody hell, this month is just zipping by. So tomorrow there will be a video of my favourites from the month of June, and I will see you all again soon for another BookTube video. Goodbye!